Τον κύριο Πρόεδρο, τον οποίο παρακαλώ ελάτε, τον οποίο το όνομα, όπως ξέρετε, είναι συνώνυμο με το όνομα, με το μικυλαϊκό άρμα.
You advance with the button to the right. You advance with the button to the right, and you go back with the button to the left. This is the pointer, the green in the middle.
Well, this is the last of the keynote lectures, and I'm going to give you a bird's eye view of the development of Mycenaean pictorial pottery in relationship to wall painting. This is what our great organizer Andreas Vlachopoulos told me to do. I distinguish four phases in the development of Mycenaean pictorial pottery. The first one being the great area of the shaft graves in the traditional low chronology from around 1600 to 1440 BC. What is Mycenaean and what is pictorial? Why Mycenaean, as I use it in this context, is a special kind of pottery making. Fine pottery, hard-fired, buff in color, and with lustrous dark paint. Pictorial in this context to me means human figures, animals of all kinds, birds and fish, and the odd fantastic creature. We are in the shaft graves when it all begins. But there is something very interesting about the shaft graves, also from my point of view as a scholar of pictorial pottery. These pictures are not Mycenaean. The right one you all recognize from the finds at Akrotiri. This swallow occurs on a jug which clearly was imported into Circle B from Thera. So that makes the connection between me and this conference. On the left you see vases which must have been made on the mainland in a technique called by Jack Davis polychrome matte painted. They're mainland vases. They occur in the Argolith at the time of the shaft graves and in some other places. And they show birds, stylized birds, which have a strong connection with the Cycladic Islands, as I was permitted to notice this morning when I was in the Akrotiri workshop. So this is shaft graves pictorial pottery, but it's not Mycenaean. There is very little pictorial pottery of Mycenaean quality in the shaft graves, which is odd, because in the shaft grave area you see this burst, this new interest in pictorial representations in various artistic media, in the shaft graves themselves and in that period. And the great inspirator, no doubt about that, is neo-palatial. Now here we are at what is perhaps the oldest Mycenaean pictorial vase. A simple cup from the cemetery at Kokla in the Argolith, which according to the excavator Katie Dimokopoulou dates to LH1 or LH2A. And it has a simple frieze of birds swimming around it. On the left, which is also shaft grave period, but is not Mycenaean, this fragmentary big jar is in the Middle Helladic tradition, matte painted. And it has this sticky figure. It's from Zundita in Corinthia. It's very rare Middle Helladic pictorial. Middle Helladic pottery is basically aniconic, like early Helladic pottery was. And here on the right, many of you know it, this great jar from Egina, from Colonna, of the same time, and it reminds me of the ships we've seen, one of those galleys, and it is of about the same time. So this is one of the very few pictures, along with that, of pictorial Middle Helladic. But we're talking about Mycenaean. aren't we? Here we are a little further in phase 2 of the development of Mycenaean pictorial pottery, which I take to last from LH2b to LH3A1, perhaps early 3H2, i.e. from about 1440 to 370, 360 BC in the traditional chronology. And we're looking at these little birds on shirts at the top. They're from Berbati, from the so-called porter's workshop near Mycenae in the Agorist, where Akrotiri a long time ago discovered a great deal of pictorial pottery. And the earliest rare pieces go back to the second phase. These, the left and the right one, are from a clear LH3A1 context. The second one is sort of similar, but has no good context. And you see they're little birdies, decorated bodies, these funny wings, and there's no doubt about it that they derive from Minoan ceramic prototypes, like the pot from the Pixies from Malat Samuri, a drawing by Phil Betancourt, and that's, the connections are clear. This is very interesting, these Pixies, because it's a prime example of the upsurge of pictorial pottery in Crete, in LM2 to 3A1 stroke 3A2, ending with the destruction, I should say, to be careful, of Knossos. And much of this upsurge of pottery, of pictorial pottery in Crete, is concentrated at Knossos, is in that sense palatial. And these are wonderful scenes which Phil and other people connect with so-called Nilotic scenes, which go back to, say, the miniature fresco from the West House in Akrotiri, and other such representations like an inlaid dagger from the shaft graves. So these, perhaps these Cretan pictorial pots go back to wall paintings. But the little birds, which are early in the development of Mycenaean bird representations, derive not from wall painting, but from Minoan pots. Some of these Minoan pots, actually with birds or fish, have been found on the mainland, so they were a direct source of information. They're very important. Now, this is a piece I could give a lecture about, but that's not allowed. We are only allowed 20 minutes. This is a little shirt from Thera, found in a late palatial 3B2 context, but clearly dating much earlier, I suppose dating to 3A1, the second phase. And it's from a very rare shape at that time. It's from a mug, a little cup, and the stipple pattern, the sponge pattern on the inside, gives its actual date. That's typical according to the experts like Penelope Mountjoy, 3A1. So this is a very early pictorial representation, and it's in the second phase, I should say. It's excellent Mycenaean fabric manufacture of a complex pictorial scene. But alas, very little is preserved on this side. But enough to give you a glimpse of what was being made at the time in 3A1, say in the earlier 14th century. 3 men in a row, warriors are going to the left. Of the left-hand one, only the tip of his spear is preserved. The second one has a warrior's helmet and is holding a spear and a tower shield, while the one on the right has a figure of 8 shield. They have antecedents. I can't help it. I don't want to flatter the organizers, but the better of this conference, the best parallels are, of course, the miniature fresco from the West House at Thera. We have nothing contemporary, either in Mycenaean pictorial pottery or in Minoan. The upsurge of Minoan pictorial pottery concentrates on birds, fish, and the odd animal, and very few human figures in Crete at the time. But there may have been frescoes, if this indeed derives from wall painting, at the time, either in Crete or in mainland Greece itself, but we haven't got it. maybe we'll find it this summer. So, and it harks back to pictures like that. This little vase, with this unique piece, stands in the tradition of Aegean pictorial decoration in general. Now this is a lovely. This is the so-called window crater from a tomb at Kurion in Cyprus. And you know why it's called window crater. There are these ladies, these Minoan court ladies, holding a lily, a flower, in a, let's say, an architectural setting. It's a fairly large vase. It's a crater. It's a crater of the necklace variety, which offered a nice surface, although curving, like a flat wall, but a nice large surface for pictorial decoration. And these are these Minoan court ladies. But the clay, the manufacture, makes it Mycenaean. And I'm sure clay analysis has been done on this kind of vase. It comes from a workshop in the Argolid, near the great centers of Mycenae, Tiryns, and Medea. And who knows, it comes from the potter's workshop at nearby Berma. On the left, two shirts which belong with this vase. This is part of a similar crater. Another Minoan lady, long-haired, from Kition, the settlement of Kition in Cyprus. And the one of the left, even smaller, probably from a similar vase, is from Tiryns, from a later contact. But they all, and you will all agree, they derive from Minoan palatial art, in particular from Minoan wall painting. So here the connections are clear. The dating of this vase is a bit of a problem. It's either very late in my second phase, which ends with LH3A1 to 2, or it is indeed at the start of the long sequence of these grandiose amphoid crater, necklace craters, and then ring-based craters, which are typical of phase 3 of the Mycenaean pictorial pottery development. Phase 3, in which a process of standardization, of conventionalization, I can hardly pronounce the word because I'm Dutch, takes place. The scenes we have so far are lively. They're fresh. And this is too. But it stands at the head of a tradition, you will see in a minute, which leads to stereotype, repetitive compositions. Anyway, the Minoan connections are clear, and particularly with wall painting, as we know. And look, here they are. La Parisienne, the last phase of the fresco paintings at Knossos. This is a piece many of you may not know. It's one of the few Minoan palace-style jars of that period of upsurge of Minoan pictorial pottery, LM23A1. It's a palace-style jar from Knossos, and it has a similar female face with this very endearing little lock at top front, like La Parisienne. So here, we are in Crete, the connection here is absolutely clear. Vase painting and wall painting. And the vase painters were limited because they had to decorate a relatively small surface, which was round and sometimes impeded by handles or a spout, while the painters on flat walls had more space. And anyway, the possibilities for varying in color are fewer on the vase paint, for the vase painters than on the fresco painting. I'm stating the obvious. And here on the right, of course, is a detail of the sarcophagus of Ayatriada, which nowadays I think is dated by the experts in LM3A2, say, still in this period. There she is. Going now into the third phase of Mycenaean pictorial pottery. This is the window crater from the other side, perhaps the back side, I don't know. You see the ladies, and then there is also one of the very earliest of a long series of chariot scenes on this relatively large crater. It's a chariot moving at some speed, but it's already the typical Mycenaean chariot crater. And where does the chariot as a motif come from in Mycenaean vase painting? Not from Minoan vase painting, like the birds and the fish did and some of the animals. It must derive from the latest phase of Minoan wall painting. This drawing is very dear to me. I don't know whether Livia Morgan knows it, but Mark Cameron gave it to me many years ago when I was writing my dissertation on Aegean chariots. All this is preserved. This is Mark's colored pencils, and here he's constructed a chariot scene. And they must be scenes like this, and they're very rare even at Knossos in wall painting, must lie at the bottom of these vast representations of chariots, processions. Now here we are on familiar ground, the so-called Zeus crater, the Greek supreme god, from a tomb again, not in Greece, but in Cyprus, in Enkoumi. And it's probably fairly early in the sequence of these grand craters. And this is the amphiroid crater, the other variety. They use the necklace crater, which is, I gather, of a mainland origin, but the amphiroid crater shape with the distinct neck is of Minoan origin, as we will see in a moment. Oh, we already see it. This should be already in the third phase. It's already stylized with the chariot scene. And on the back there is the great big octopus, which they very much like the Mycenaeans in the third phase to put on this big crater. It's a Minoan motif, of course, in origin, but it's highly stylized already. So this Zeus crater fits the sequence very well. A word about these craters. Most of them, as you know, have not been found in mainland Greece, although they are of mainland manufacture, and particularly has been established by analysis, by scientists, they're particularly from the Argolias, where they must have been made in specialized workshops. And the interesting aspect, which is well known, is that most of these vases went their way to Cyprus and further east to the Levant, where they're clearly very popular. And if you read Anne Brispard's recent book on wall painting and movement of fresco painters from Greece to the Levant and to Tel Daba in Egypt, you can make sense of these big vases, spectacular vases, which ended up abroad in the East. They were exotic, they were new to them, and they perhaps gave prestige to their owners. Words like that you can add together. On the right, you see 3 pictures of one amphiroid crater from Crete, made in that upsurge period, the last big phase of Knossos, I would say. And Evans produced a drawing like that, but my colleague Christy Morris corrected it, and this is what she drew, and this is one of the pieces. That's the shape. It's the amphiroid crater shape, which the Minoans used too, for lively scenes of birds and fish, and in their original landscape or marine environment. LM2, LM3A122. Now here is another one of the very earliest amphiroid craters. It's Cretan. You can see that from the fabric, which is coarser than the Mycenaean, but you can see it also from the low neck, which is decorated. The later Mycenaean amphiroid craters have a taller neck, which is usually dark painted. This is Minoan from Tilissos, near to Knossos, and it's a good example of the early Minoan pictorial, not pictorial, amphiroid crater. And there cannot be any doubt, although it's been a long discussion, in which my teacher, who has recently died, as you know, Hector Kettling, had a big voice in the discussion of the origin of the amphiroid crater, the Minoan as well as the Mycenaean. He and others argued that these bronze amphiroid craters, which again have been found in tombs at Cyprus, are late, and they cannot be the origin of the Minoan and Mycenaean ceramic amphiroid. But Christine Morris and I have recently finished a manuscript for the annual of the British School, arguing, and others have done that before, Evans, first of all, that these vase shapes really derive from metal prototypes. So when we are talking about Mycenaean pictorial pottery, we must stress that it's not only wall painting, which will have influenced the pictures or the shape. Metalwork, vases, relief decoration, perhaps metal mallorai also must have played a part, but that's not the subject of this lecture. So what we reconstruct, and others before us, is that Minoan grand amphiroid craters in bronze, and they were decorated as Minoan genie and other pieces, and these pieces which have been found in Crete go back to the Neopalatial period, LM1A, LM1B. And the Minoans copied that great shape in clay, and the Mycenaeans adopted the shape from the Minoans. But they didn't adopt the chariot from Minoan ceramic prototypes. They must have copied, been inspired to paint chariot scenes by wall painting. And all this is very interesting because it ties in with a period of very close interaction between Crete, Knossos in particular, and the Mycenaean mainland, the Argolith in particular, in this period LM2, 3A1, 3A2, in which perhaps Mycenaeans took over at Knossos. So there is a story behind it. There are implications. Anyway, here we are still in fairly early phase 3, 14th century, a Mycenaean amphiroid crater from Maronia to Cyprus again, with prancing goats in a stylized rock landscape, which directly goes back to Minoan prototypes, in wall painting and in other artistic media from Crete. This is a lovely little shirt from an amphiroid crater from Knossos, which is more lively than that, and it dates to that upsurge in its landscape section. And the origin of it all may well be a wall painting like this from Akrotiri. LM1B, the Neopalatial, this prancing goat, or perhaps a deer, in its natural environment. So the relationships are fairly clear. This must derive from things like that, and this goes back to them, to Crete. Phase 3, the conventionalization, the repetition. These are typical Mycenaean vases of 3A2 to 3B1, say 1370 to 1190, 1180 BC. The debole, the amphiroid craters, all the shapes, as they've been found all over the Mediterranean. And these have been found in Ugarit, in the Levant, on the coast, in this big port site. And they stand at the chariot scene. And this is the new crater shape, the ring-shaped crater shape, which takes over from the necklace crater and the amphiroid crater. It still offers quite a lot of space, like this. And this one was found in Enkomi again, in Cyprus, and it shows a file of horned deer accompanied by birds as fillers, and they look back, and they have patterned bodies. Now, a lot has been made of this vase and others like it. For instance, this fragment of an amphiroid crater from the potter's workshop at Barbati, where Akrotiri reconstructed the same motif. A lot has been made because it may be directly connected with wall painting. In this case, Mycenaean wall painting from Thera, the frieze of goats with patterned bodies and heads looking back may have been an inspiration for this. But I'm not sure of it, and I can't ask the people in question. the last two. This is the famous warrior crater in color, and it should be in color because it's polychrome. This is very unusual. Different colors used on a Mycenaean pictorial vase. It dates to the post-palatial period, of course, LH3C, and in particular, to be precise, to the middle phase, middle 3C, which dates around 1150, 1090, thereabouts. It's not sure. And this is a period of the greatest interest, and Vanuria Dacronia will speak about it to us. Her finds of similar date from Kinos, and there is a lot of material from Kinos, from Lefkandi on Aboya, from Mycenae, from Tiryns, for several sites. There is again an upsurge in Mycenaean pottery in the second phase of LH3C, before it peters out in late 3C. The file of warriors going off, the woman pressed in a small space beside a double-horned handle, and it's very similar, as so many people have observed, to the so-called painted stela, also from Mycenae, which is either by the same hand or at least from the same workshop and of similar time. But the so-called painted stela, which Andreas already showed briefly earlier on, seems ages ago, it's only 2 hours, shows a similar scene of marching warriors. And at the bottom, this is quite endearing, I think. A frieze of horned deer with a little hedgehog thrown in to fill as a space filler. I don't see so much symbolic meaning in Mycenaean pictorial pottery, but I should keep this for the discussion or for tonight when we're having real discussions at the party. Anyway, this is a strong connection between a Mycenaean pictorial vase, one of the last of the greatest, a ring-based crater, with a diameter of about, a ring diameter of about 50 centimeters. And of course people link it, and I too, with the later Greek craters. It probably was used in the symposium for man. It was to mix water and wine so that they wouldn't get drunk too quickly. And it's also a showpiece, a display piece, the center of the symposium, as many people, including Sue Sherrod, has often pointed out, and Louis Steele and others. So this is fine. This is pottery, polychrome pottery. But what about it? I've been told that Mycenaean wall painting stops with the destruction of the palaces around 1190, 1180, that thereafter there was a period of decline, and certainly there is not much early 3C pictorial pottery. There's an upsurge later on, and this is still in the old wall painting technique, a stela of sandstone covered with white plaster and painted polychrome. So had this artist, assuming it's the same one, seen wall paintings in the ruins of Mycenae, the Mycenaean palace? Or what, had his father been a wall painting? Had the technique been passed over to him? According to George Milonas, there are 1 or 2 Mycenaean wall paintings from the cult center dating through CC, but he nor Spiros Yakovlidis, who is responsible for the publication of those finds, have yet published the context, the pottery context of that wall painting, the so-called Lady with the Lily. But assuming that there were no wall paintings on view anymore after the destruction of the palaces, it's odd that this is still in the old fresco technique. And you may remember that this stela has a long biography. It goes back perhaps to the time of the shaft graves. It may have been a funerary stela, like the ones found by Slimon and then by Papa Dimitriou and Milonas in Circle B, with insides decoration, which was later covered in plaster and decorated polychrome, and then ended up in the blocking wall of the chamber tomb in which it was found in Mycenae. So it's a curious note to end on. around 1150, 1100 BC. Pictorial vase painting, flourishing in Middle Swiss, but this odd, unique piece of what goes back to fresco painting. I've been too long.
Ευχαριστούμε τον κύριο πρόεδρο, δεν κατάλαβα ότι τέλειωσε Λοιπόν, δεν νομίζω ότι έχουμε πάρα πολλή ώρα για συζήτηση. Μένουν μόνο 1/4 με 10 λεπτά. Πολλοί ταξιδεύουμε από τις 5 η ώρα το πρωί. Νομίζω ότι έχουμε λίγο χρόνο για πολύ σύντομες, εύστοχες ερωτήσεις και να πιάσουμε τα θέματα μία με δύο ερωτήσεις, δυστυχώς, στο κάθε ομιλητή. Και αν θέλετε βέβαια. Στον κύριο Ντούμα πρώτα. Έχετε κάποια ερώτηση, διευκρίνηση? Νομίζω ότι το καταλάβατε, το μάθημα καλά. Εντάξει. Στη κυρία Τελεβάντο. Νομίζω ότι πεινάτε. Στον κύριο Ρίνα, πολλά θα έκανα να ρωτήσω. A lot of things to ask. There is a very complex issue and matter. This the way of transfer of Egyptian or Anatolian motifs to the Aegean and especially to Minoan Crete. And I think that Minoan period is the most crucial for this importation and adaptation of Egyptian motifs. And the contrary, the other way from the Aegean to the east. Yes. Hello, Robert.
This is a question for Professor Rittner. I was just wondering what you think the role of old Syrian seals may have had to do with and old Syrian art in particular had to do with the transmission of these motifs, where the griffin, for example, especially the Kushan crescent griffin with wings, is an omnipresent motif.
It's entirely possible. I have no way of proving or disproving. All I can tell you is that it shows up in the Egyptian canon. After the traditional griffins are no longer being used, and specifically in the reign of Akhenaten, and then it continues throughout the Mid-Kingdom into the Roman period. But there's so much transmission, as the seal, the North Syrian seal that Cologne showed, the Ankh sign that's adjacent to Bulgari. Cultural aspects are moving. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to point out that in the Poitiers, you have these various ambassadors shown, not so much to indicate that Poitiers is an extremely important individual, but the fact that international relations are a fact of life in this country, and we shouldn't understress those. So anything coming via Syria, I suspect I'm answering too long, but the Achimboyuk monkeys, holy pots, I suspect that is an Anatolian or Syrian development from Egyptian trade goods who hold that those monkeys are not typically found much north of Egypt unless they're being given away as trade items themselves. So I think Syria is an important transit.
I'm a little skeptical about the influence of the artistic repertoire of the Aegean through imports of goods as we show, because none of them represents anything in a naturalistic way. But on the contrary here, animals, trees, landscapes are in a very, very naturalistic way. without having seen the real animal, the painter of monkeys, for example, or of the antelopes, would have never made these magnificent pictures.
And, excuse me. No, especially on the subject of monkeys, and I think that it was not difficult to import real pets in the Minoan palaces or even in Santorini. And secondly, what the color concerned, the blue color, yes, the explanation that you offer is very logical and plausible one. But we have always to have in mind the color convention used in the Aegean. We have quite blue birds or trees and other animals, and of course it exists this correspondence with the blue Egyptian monkeys, the simulacres, but the convention of colors used in the Aegean is very extensive, and blue color is very often used not in naturalistic way. And το δέρμα του... Πώς? Ξέρεις καλά αγγλικά.
Η κρεβατοβουρβούρα.
Yes, but it's a very interesting explanation, the proposition of... Yes.
It is true that the Egyptians did send the monkeys as trade goods. They received them as trade from farther south. They sent them on to the Assyrians and others. So it is not impossible, in fact it's very likely that they would have been sent. But my primary concern was the notion that the activities of the monkeys, not their depiction as such, but the activities of monkeys seen with temple architecture, with pots, showing reverence to deities, that this was all necessarily an invention coming out of either Anatolia or the Aegean. How it's depicted is a different matter, but the fact that it can be depicted with all of those features doesn't have to be an Aegean or Anatolian invention, because they're all shown much earlier and much later in Egypt with a long existence.
But it's very important that monkeys in the Aegean are collecting, gathering crocuses is quite typical, typical Theran and Minoan Cretan activity is involved in a local, typically local activity.
But wouldn't you expect an adaptation locally of something that's being brought in? That was sort of my point, is that when things are coming into Egypt from abroad, they're immediately Egyptianized, so that you can see features of the representation, but the use has now acquired its own feature. And in the same way, things coming from Egypt elsewhere, whether it's among the Phoenicians, whether it's going into Assyria, whether it's going into Anatolia, they are all adapted for the local environment, and I would expect that as well. But I wouldn't agree that a pot, a monkey holding a pot, couldn't be something that would be understood by seeing the Egyptian representation, because those were going.
Ευχαριστούμε. Οι ερωτήσεις στην κυρία Νανό Μαρινάτου, φαντάζομαι πολλές. Παράδειγμα, σε διάφορες κατηγορίες τέχνης και ακόμα και διαχρονικά μπορούμε κάπως να πλησιάσουμε αυτούς τους κώδικες. Βέβαια η Νανό μετά το βιβλίο της είναι φυσικό, της αρέσει και ο ίδιος έχει απόλυτο δίκιο. Λοιπόν, κύριε Βλαχόπουλε, σας ακούμε.
Δεν είναι ερώτηση, είναι μια άλλη διάσταση σε αυτό που ξεκίνησε ο κύριος Μπουλότη να λέει, ότι θα αντιληφθούμε, άσχετα αν συμφωνήσουμε ή διαφωνήσουμε, καλύτερα την άποψη της κυρίας Μαρινάτου, όταν δούμε τη χρωματική εκδοχοποίηση αυτού του ορόφου, αυτού του χώρου, θα το ακούσουμε μεθαύριο από τον Νίκο Σεπετζόγλου, το ζωγράφο που επιμελήθηκε διαφορετικά χωρίς το δικό μας ερμηνευτικό μάτι, με το ζωγραφικό του μάτι, για να προσθέσουμε μία άλλη διάσταση στην διάσταση δηλαδή, του χρώματος και όχι μόνο του μοτίβου. Αυτό θα ήθελα να πω. Και πολλά περισσότεροι στο εργαστήριο.
Λοιπόν, και περνάμε στον κύριο Κρόβελ, που εγώ θα πω νεαρός, ό,τι έμαθα για μικυναϊκά άρματα, το έμαθα από εσάς. Λοιπόν, ερώτηση για τον κύριο Κρόβελ. Βάσο, κυρία Μπτάτσικα, έλα Βάσο, δεν έχεις. Ναι, εγώ θυμάμαι από παλιά, σε ό,τι αφορά και αγγλικά. Ναι, my English is not good. Already, yes, about the subject of the genesis or of the influence of frescoes on vase painting, I was always impressed, and I think that is the best example of this influence. I was impressed by the representation of the woman head from Knossos, on the shirt from Knossos. That's real. We have just to put colors on this design, on this ceramic figure, and have real fresco. All the other examples are filtered through the vase painter perspective, and yes, but this shirt of the Bata style period is the best example of transcription of fresco painting human figure on a ceramic medium.
Is, and I'm speaking now to my notes here, the whole thing is in that upsurge period, the last palatial period, I had it in Knossos, there is an upsurge in particularly pictorial pottery, but this head of this lady is about the only human figure. They go on birds, all kinds of things, fish, animals like the Akrotiri, so there's very few people. But they depict people in stone relief vases, in metalwork, in frescoes all the time. So.
Δεν ξέρω αν έχετε να κάνετε κάποια άλλη ερώτηση. Νομίζω ότι έτσι αλλιώς τα θέματα, I think that all the subjects which will be presented here in the next days, I think that we move and remove the same problematic, and we shall have the occasion of several occasions to go deeper to discuss this kind of subjects, of questions. Yes, Roman?
Ναι, τρώμε. Ευχαριστώ πολύ κύριε Μπουλώτη. Ακούγομαι, ελπίζω, για την πρώτη προεδρία και γενικότερα για τη συμβολή του Χρήστου στη σκέψη πολλών, ιδίως των νεωτέρων εξημών. Ευχαριστώ πολύ που βρεθήκατε εδώ κάτω από αυτές τις συνθήκες απόψε και με περισσότερη ηρεμία ελπίζω αύριο να συνεχίσουμε τη δουλειά μας. Πέρα και πίσω από τις τυπικές ευχαριστίες με τις οποίες ξεκίνησα, θα ήθελα να ανταποκριθώ σε κάποιες τυπικές, συμβατικές, αλλά και μερικές ουσιαστικές υποχρεώσεις. Αυτές οι επιστημονικές ματιές, συζητήσεις και εικόνες αφορούν, ανήκουν σε έναν συγκεκριμένο κόσμο, τον κόσμο τον δικό μας. Ζούμε όμως σε έναν άλλο κόσμο και ικανοποιούμε ως κανονικοί άνθρωποι τις ανάγκες του. Μιλώ για την πολύ ουσιαστική στήριξη που όση ώρα τουλάχιστον οι πιο ήρεμοι από εσάς απολαμβάνετε οι υπόλοιποι πίσω προσπαθούμε ακόμα να αποκαταστήσουμε. Χάρη λοιπόν στον Χρήσανθο Καραβία και στον Λευτέρη Ζόρζο, όσοι δεν είναι εδώ μαζί μας έρχονται. Τους ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Όπως τον κύριο Καμπανά και τον κύριο Κώστα Κωνσταντινίδη από τον Ηλιότοπο, που σε χρόνους που θυμίζουν το Αιγαίουμ της Κοπενχάγης έφτιαξαν τη δυνατότητα του να βιντεοσκοπηθεί η βραδιά μας απόψε. Ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω θερμότατα την κυρία Πρίνου, που και αυτή σε χρόνο ρεκόρ θαλασσοδαρμένη έφτιαξε το μικρό χώρο του Ελληνικού Οργανισμού Τουρισμού. And my deepest gratitude and thanks go to Dr. Ariti Prinu, who generously, against all bad weather conditions, arrived on the island, and the Greek National Tourist Organization, thanks to which the dinner of tonight and of Sunday is offered to all of us. Θέλω επίσης να πω ότι χωρίς τους ανθρώπους του Μπελονίου, χωρίς τους ανθρώπους της εφορίας αρχαιοτήτων από απέναντι, τους φύλακες που από αύριο θα μας φιλοξενούν, την Λίτσα Καλαμπούκη, ιδιαιτέρως το Μανώλη Χαμαουή από το εργαστήριο των τοιχογραφιών, μπορεί να σας θυμίζουν ονόματα των ανακοινώσεων, αλλά να ξέρετε ότι ήταν τα μάτια, τα αυτιά, τα χέρια εδώ. Και με αυτά τα λίγα λόγια, και επειδή γνωρίζω την ταλαιπωρία όλων, σας καλώ εκ μέρους του Δήμου Θήρας. Ο Δήμαρχος κ. Ζόρζος έπρεπε να φύγει πριν από λίγο. Κάπου στα σκοτάδια πίσω ήταν ο Περιφερειάρχης για πολύ λίγο, ο κ. Μαχαιρίδης. Ήρθε και αυτός. Μπορούμε να τσιμπήσουμε κάτι ήσυχα και να πιούμε σαντορινιό κρασί. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ τους Σαντορινιούς που μέχρι απόψε ήταν μαζί μας, και εμείς αύριο 9 η ώρα στο αμφιθέατρο της Ανασκαφής Ακροτηρίου. Ευχαριστώ.
Mark.